Welcome to MGoRadio 9.2, the aftermath of a 31-12 loss to Texas. And we're going to mix up our usual order here because obviously Michigan is playing Arkansas State this weekend. But it felt more pressing to talk about what we learned from the UFRs from the Texas game because that's going to be more relevant going forward than what happens against the Sun Belt team. So, well, why don't you start, Seth? It'll be a little bit less depressing.
Yeah, it wasn't, it wasn't that bad. It was kind of like the Ohio State game in 23, where the only difference being that Michigan kept us starting from the 48-yard line, and they couldn't get off the field on third down. So our concerns about Wink are justified. I think that at this point it's only week 2, so you can't say he's not going to change. But I think that there's definitely a transition for him to college, and you're especially seeing it not necessarily in the RPS numbers. Like, I went in expecting to have, like, RPS minus blah, 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 right? But it's just busts. And I don't think the busts are necessarily RPS. It's not like Texas did something to screw them up. They did something to screw them up, right? They're asking the linebackers to do so much that they can't remember, oh, yeah, in this situation I have to peel off and take the running back in the flat. And they're doing more of that on third down. Like the exotics come out on third down all the time. Obviously, they had that package with Mason Graham at defensive end. It works once. It works because Texas thinks Wink is going to blitz, and they put 7 guys in the protection, and they don't have enough receivers out there. And the only other thing to really talk about is, Jair Hill, who I haven't taken anything off his ceiling. He had I think a plus 10, minus 17, which is a lot for a defensive back. So it's they and it's like I looked to see if Michigan was trying to do anything to alleviate him a little bit, and Texas was just going to go wherever he was. So when you're a cornerback, they can go at you, and they can decide to not go at you. So they decided to not go at Will Johnson, and eventually that just took Isaiah Bond off the field, and that was it.
So, like, it is sort of ominous though that they're having so many busts on a team that has, big chunks of a guys who played last year significantly, right? Like
Yeah,
the okay.
yeah. Like Ernest Hausman busting is he had a +4, -12 in this game, and Ernest Hausman has not been someone that we've seen make a lot of mistakes in the past. Jimmy Rolder's another one who just had a lot of busts or just didn't know what to do. Like near the end of the game, Rolder's just standing there. It's a 3rd and 1. He's got an absolutely clear lane to go and make a stuff. And I know it's near the end of the game, so at that point, does it matter? But he just stands there, and they get the conversion, and he makes the stop, and they get 3 yards instead of -1 yards. But it's just, I think that like there's just so much on these guys. I am willing to believe that there's just so much on them right now that they're not activating. They're not playing fast. And it affected Barham, who had kind of a Mouton-esque day and plus 9.5, -10. It affected Hausman, affected Rolder, and like that's where you see it the most, right? If they're overreacting to things or they're overplaying an RPO, and you're playing Texas, the RPO team, that's even though the numbers go into the linebackers, I think it's more on the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell, but the thing that I think you want to do as a college defensive coordinator is just get your base down and then build on it from there. And you see a lot of teams with very successful defenses that don't really do a whole lot in terms of formations and different linemen. Like, so Texas had a 30 front, which is a 3-man line in this game for chunks of it. But that really only came out after the game was decided. And so it's clear that they
Yeah.
want to have that flexibility, but what they're doing is they're establishing who they are. They're a 4-2-5 and what they do. And then when they have some time and opportunity, they want to have that as a curveball. It didn't feel like Michigan, where Michigan was like, all right, here's our wacky formation on 3rd and 4, which is not a wacky formation down, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not a passing down in college football.
Yeah.
It's a regular down.
And we talked about it on WTKA with like the thing, his answers. Like he blitzes a safety, and in the NFL, there's not that much difference between your safety and your linebacker. He's going to get a win against a running back, and that's going to be a good blitz. If you just if you have a blitzer coming and he's lined up with the running back, that is going to be a win for the defense normally. It wasn't, because Quinton Johnson's 185 pounds, and he just gets rocked out of there by a running back, and now they've got a running lane. And it's like, if you just rush 4, and like there's a couple times later in this game, especially in the red zone, they rush 3, right? And that works. Like, you can just rush Derek, drop Stewart into coverage, rush Grant, Moore, and Graham, and it doesn't matter if they have 7 guys in the protection. One of those guys is going to break through, and then he's got to leave the pocket. And now you have the field, and you have not enough people out in the pattern, and you win, right? And that's where Michigan got most of their RPS wins. Is, eventually Wink he didn't blitz as much as people think. He ran a lot of 4-man pressures. It's just on 3rd down, for some reason he decided he wanted to go with this exotic, and he had all these things that he wanted to try with it, and it was like he wanted to win by being smart and having the great idea, as opposed to just letting his players go and win. And that wasn't every single time. When he let his players go and win, they did. Josiah Stewart came out well. Kenneth Grant scored well. Mason Graham scored well until the end, when he was on his 58th snap in a row, and it's like, okay, now he's getting doubled, right? And the mistakes that they had, Makari Page gets crossed by a tight end for a big chunk. I have been charting Makari Page since 2020. And the last time he got crossed by a tight end without chucking the guy and getting on his tail was Minnesota in 2020. So it's just, I think he was tired. I think that these guys are out there too long. Every single time they got off the field, the offense would have an interception at midfield, and they'd be right back on the field again. So they couldn't sit and talk about their mistakes. So I think that this was a compound disaster. That it's not. I think that you could go up against an elite offense with a better plan with this defense and win without tweaking too much. I think that it was week 2 that Wink tried to get too clever, and I think it's not that hard to go from where we are here to where we were against Washington last year.
Okay, well,
Yeah. Do you want some good news? I got a little bit of good news. Ike
okay, go
Awuna.
ahead.
Ike Awuna. Every time he got in there, he made a play. And
Okay.
Texas has a good offensive line. I think they had a better offensive line than Washington last year. And they've been grading out that way, and they're expected to be a good offensive line, and I think that they're legit. And you saw they throw Eno Etta in there, and this was something we talked about in preseason, right? Where you're like, oh, he's 300 pounds, he's probably a DT now. I'm like, no, I think he's probably still just a big defensive end, right? Like a Wormley kind of guy. And when he got doubled down, he just got moved. Etta's not there. Etta's not a defensive tackle. That's unfortunate. But Trey Pierce was okay, and Ike Awuna, he took it personally. He fought. He got around. He moved kind of like a little Mozzie Smith, and that was a guy, another one of these players that Michigan has who had high potential and was going to need 4 years to see the field. So, I mean, you got a guy in him. You got a guy in Benny. I think we can survive at defensive tackle after the 2 stars are gone.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, when I did that UFR, like usually what happens is, there's plays in which there was an opportunity and one guy messed it up. And so you're like, oh, Michigan has an error rate here, and that error rate's a little too high. And they can get that error rate down, and then things will be better. And I did not come away from this game with that impression. So the 4 of the 5 offensive linemen came in negative on the ground, with Judy significantly negative. Evan Link set a UFR record with 16 pass pro minuses. I just don't think that there's unless we're talking about like 4 guys being injured to the point where they can't play, but not injured to the point where they show up on the injury report. Like, it just feels like Michigan rolled snake eyes on every single one of those 6 guys, because Dom Jadis got knocked over by a linebacker on a blitz that was relevant. He took on a defensive end on a pull and just got obliterated. Like, he's not it. And Evan Link is not it either. And it was more apparent in Link's pass protection than his run blocking. But the kind of stuff that they were trying to do just didn't make sense with the personnel they had. They lined up unbalanced like a third of the time. And like, I kind of get that unbalanced is sort of an interesting trick to put on the field because it breaks the rules for how opposing defenses align. But I think you have severe diminishing returns on that, because the 15th time you line up unbalanced, they're not going to be like, oh no, we can't handle this, because they handled the previous 14. And one of the really deleterious effects of this is that there were a bunch of snaps where Colson Loveland was lined up as an inline blocker who literally was not allowed to go downfield.
Right.
And like,
you're taking away the threat.
Right. And to me, that says volumes about what they thought they could do this offseason. And so on this podcast, and I know we're just guys on the internet, but we were looking at the personnel Michigan had available, and we were envisioning something like an Urban Meyer, Rich Rod offense.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the mobile quarterback. You don't really have an inline tight end. You do have Owen Schmidt. You do have that fullback who can really block. And they just didn't do any of it. So the offensive brain trust just did the same kind of stuff they did a year ago. The offense hasn't changed in any way whatsoever, and it's too late to make a meaningful change. So combined with the blocking, which I think is unrecoverable, like you might have 1 or 2 guys get better over the course of the season, but you're always going to have at least 2 trouble spots on that line. You don't have an inline tight end. I just don't see where this offense gets meaningfully better. Incrementally, sure. Like, they can do better. They can score some points against bad defenses. They can figure some stuff out. But fundamentally, this is not an offense that has the personnel to be successful at the level where Michigan would even like sniff a playoff bid.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I mean, it's what would you do? I mean, like just say they call
what
you
would I
in,
do
Brian.
now?
Yeah, what would you do right now? Well, I mean, obviously, there's nothing we can do about fixing their offseason except for a coaching change, which is not happening in year one. So, what would you do now?
Every snap there would be Khalil Mullings, Max Bredesen, and Donovan Edwards on the field. And we would run diamond formations. We would motion guys out, in and out. We would run a lot of misdirection. We would probably put Alex Orji in a quarterback and just try to make that work. And the most depressing stat from this game is that Max Bredesen, a captain, and Khalil Mullings, the best running back on the team, both had 13 snaps.
Uh,
And I don't like. There's no. That's indefensible. That is indefensible. To you can't block the run, and you're like, we need to be a power running team, and your literal best blocker on the team gets 13 snaps. I don't care if he's a move tight end. And like that just shows you how they didn't change anything from last year. Because that was about a Max Bredesen level of snaps last year, but that was in a totally different context where you had AJ Barner, you had Bonus OL, and you had tons of guys who could block. And Bredesen's role was strictly defined, and that was fine in that context. But every snap that he's not on the field is a wasted opportunity. Because like there's one play in this game where I think Michigan gets 3 yards, and it starts off with Bredesen absolutely obliterating the Sam, like pushes him across the opposite hash.
yeah.
And then Marlon Klein screws up and Dom Jadee screws up, and Michigan gets 3 yards out of it. And I'm like, like you want to be a power running team and you're not putting the personnel out there to do it. But personally, I just don't see this happening. Because like if it was pretty obvious that Khalil Mullings is one of your best offensive players before the season, and it was to anybody who had watched Michigan play football.
I mean, I got the jersey right behind me here. This is he's not just a good player, right? He is one of the people who can change the paradigm. And
right, and we were talking about how like it's a really difficult proposition when you have Edwards and Mullings in the same backfield, because what kind of personnel is that and how should you match up? And they ran that once in this game. And it's just like, I don't know what they did this offseason. I don't know what they installed, or if they just sort of decided that they were going to coast on what they were doing before. I guess coast probably is too pejorative, but like it felt like they had an arrogance about them where it's just like, this worked before, so it's going to work again.
yeah, I can't. I mean, speculating what goes on there, like I don't even know if Sharon Moore is the one or Kirk Campbell is the one directing this, right? I can't tell you. We don't have that inside info of how the program's operating and who's making decisions or what decisions what they're basing their decisions on. When you look at it, though, it's like
the thing that really jumps out is that they did use that package fairly regularly last year, right?
yeah,
Like there were 4, 5, 6 snaps a game where it was Mullings and Edwards in the backfield, and those snaps went well.
yeah.
Like Mullings delivered crushing blocks as a lead blocker, and you could build on that. And instead, they decided like it's not like they needed to do something that they weren't doing before. They just needed to emphasize it, and they just haven't. And I'm sure that there's chaos with the personnel and all this stuff, but I mean, it would be nice if they were doing things that made sense. And instead, they're relying on Davis Warren to throw the ball, and they can only throw short because Link can't block anybody. And it's just like you went into fall camp expecting Alex Orji to be the quarterback, and I see no evidence of that in the offense.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. When you do see Orji take the field, they're running very simple things. And I know that like El Hadi going in the wrong gap was more important to failing the 3rd and 3 than not. And like they actually got what they wanted on the bash play or the power read play. And it's Khalil Mullings and not Edwards. It's like the one spot you actually want to use Edwards and like
this
yeah.
like the base, like, does this make sense level of context? It doesn't. And that's like, I mean, that's something that we focus on a lot because it's like, okay, we can see this and we think strategically because that's the level that we're engaging with this. And it's probably a much lower, that's a much smaller problem, the fact that they just don't have an offensive line. Like El Hadi's coming in beneath expectations. The 2 late switches are clearly disastrous. And you called this when you scouted him. You were like, this guy is not third team all Big Ten. Like, he's just a guy. And, there was one run that they had set up to be a big chunk, and Hinton gives him a big chip and climbs. And he just can't hold off a defensive tackle who's probably not that good. Right? Because the guys that Texas were playing, they had one guy who was a backup last year to their 2 very good guys and graded out very well, who might be like an all SEC type player. Their other 4 defensive tackles were just straight in the heart of just guy territory. And Michigan couldn't block them. Like, when there was an inside zone where it's just like, okay, block this guy one-on-one, it was stalemates all around. They couldn't move anybody. And the few times when a Michigan blocker did move someone, it was almost always Hinton or Bredesen. Like, that really jumped off the page. It's like, oh, right, this is a lot easier if you can get even a yard of depth. Right. And they just couldn't. So, like, I don't want to, like... go ahead.
Yeah, I know. But, like, it's Freeb, right? Like, it's disappointing based off of, like, we just heard so much from the offseason about how he was their best offensive lineman, and he's just, like, fitting in right away. And, like, the level he's playing at and the level Jadis is playing at, given the personnel decisions and what they said in the offseason, are nonsensical to the point where I can't even figure it out. But I don't see, like, a whole lot of upside in those guys.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. So I guess the nearest comparison is when Nolan Ulizio was suddenly the starting right tackle and was awful and got pulled. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't a situation where it was like, okay, we've got these guys who have been in the program and people have been talking them up a fair bit. And that was just a pure panic move because it was like the first year of Harbaugh or whatever, and it just didn't have anybody else. For a relatively established offensive line regime, because Harbaugh turned over, but Sharon Moore was the offensive line coach, and Grant Newsome was the offensive line coach last year, to like go from the expectations we had preseason to what we're staring down the barrel of now is completely unprecedented. Like, so far below a reasonable floor that, well, I would just brace yourselves, because I don't think this is going to get meaningfully better. I think this is going to be a real rough season, and we're going to be talking about basketball pretty soon. Probably not this weekend, though. So we're going to take a break, come back, and talk about the Arkansas State Red Wolves.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. If you find yourself wondering if you're on the right track for retirement, reach out to us at peakwm.com/mgoblog for a second opinion. You know, I've been sponsoring these guys for years. People keep telling me that my voice is pretty boring, and you've been fast-forwarding through my ads. Well, yeah, I'm the guy you trust for your retirement planning and investing. It's not like I'm Gus Johnson or anything. And I really like spreadsheets, okay? It's not like I just sit here and look at your finances and be like, Donovan Edwards, the pistol back.
McCarthy to throw it. McCarthy looking, throws deep, got a wide open receiver. Cornelius Johnson sprinting, touchdown Michigan. 75 yards. They said the kid couldn't throw a deep ball.
I'm going to play a bunch of clips like this all year, so now you can stop fast forwarding through my ads, okay?
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with SignalWire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. SignalWire is optimized for high-quality and low-latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
SignalWire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.2. We now turn our attention to the Arkansas State Red Wolves. But first, we would like to thank our sponsors. Thanks to Underground Printing for starting this and making it possible. Stop by and pick up some gear. Check them out at UGP Michigan Apparel, or check out our selection of shirts on the MGoBlogstore.com. Let's not forget our associate sponsors: Peak Wealth Management, Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Michigan Law Grad, Royal Oath Insurance Group, Venue by 4M, Winewood Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Champion Circle, Autograph, Fandom Rewarded, the app that rewards you for reading MGO Blog and listening to our podcast, SignalWire, where we are recording this, and the Sklar Brothers, who are coming to Ann Arbor on the 27th. Get your tickets at supersklars.com. All right, not Arizona State, Arkansas State. The most interesting bit of their team is their quarterback, second year, Jalen Rayner. Freshman, the freshman of the year in the Sun Belt a year ago, 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 58 completion percentage. Mobile guy. They run a lot of zone read with him. Pro Football Focus stats are not astounding. He's in the same range as like Brennan Sorsby and Luke Altmaier. But for a first-year group of 5 quarterback, an interesting challenge, and a guy who would have been one of the better quarterbacks on last year's schedule.
Unfortunately so. I think he's a solid player. I mean, there's some definite holes in his game. He has a tendency to throw balls high, and it wouldn't be shocking if he sails one over a receiver's head into a safety's arms tomorrow. That's something that seems foreseeable. And they mostly just ask him to do pretty simple stuff, easy, short routes, just drop back, get it out, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was looking at the Pro Football Focus stats, and I was like, wow, the average depth of target is big. But he was 7th in college football last year in average depth of target.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen all of their games. I'm just going off of the one I watched against Tulsa. It was pretty simple sort of stuff. He does throw the deep ball a little bit in that game, but it was mostly pretty rudimentary. And then he loves to run, not just the quarterback run stuff, but he scrambles a lot. And in particular, this team has some severe issues at offensive tackle. So I would anticipate quite a bit scrambling from him in this game, because it's something he falls back on very quickly if things aren't going to plan in the protection or his progressions throwing the ball.
I like to interject. Like, it's Butch Jones, right? Like, that's who's the coach of this team, and it's the Butch Jones.
I don't think anyone
offense.
knows what that means anymore, though.
Really? All right. So those of you who remember, when Michigan was talking about Butch Jones as a potential coach, he was a Brian Kelly except for instead of going downfield, Kelly just loves to have 4 verts all the time. Butch Jones likes to have 4 stop routes. He likes to have everything underneath, and then every once in a while it's a pass downfield. So when you look at his average depth of target and you're saying it's pretty long, there's no mid-range game whatsoever. It's like short stuff, and then they try to hit you with a double move.
Well, I mean, that should be a challenge for Jair Hill, who we saw have some struggles in that department
last week. I mean, this does feel like, because of the offensive line issues, even though Rayner is an interesting quarterback, going to feel more like the punt and pray kind of approaches that we saw a lot from opponents last year, where the only stuff that was going downfield was a quick fade because that gets out so fast that you can't annihilate the quarterback.
Yeah, that's generally the feeling. They have a all Sun Belt second team tackle, Malcolm Thomas, but he unfortunately is injured at the moment. Doesn't seem like he's going to play. And so in his absence, they've had 4 different tackles rotating between left and right tackle. None of them seem very good. They were all in pretty big trouble against Tulsa. So I don't anticipate that going super well for them against Michigan. And as a result, it's just hard to see this being a super competitive matchup with what Michigan can probably do controlling the line of scrimmage. But at the very least, Michigan gets some practice against a mobile quarterback. And I think it could be an interesting test of tackling, which we've been concerned about after last week's game. And Rayner's a little slippery. And so that's something that we could potentially take away from this.
Well, the other thing is that this is going to be offense that runs a ton of college crap, right?
Yep.
And will Wink Martindale be able to deal with that in some sort of effective fashion? Because, you get 3 yards instead of 1, so the offense can go downfield, and nobody's protecting Jalen Rayner from injury because he has a $50 billion contract, right? So there's a lot of different stuff that he probably hasn't seen a whole lot of in 20 years, and Arkansas State is going to put it all on the field. Probably not execute it very well, but there are some questions that we might get resolved about how Wink Martindale is adapting to college.
I'm guessing no. I'm guessing no because this is what's happened every time we play the Sun Belt or a Mountain West team is they'll play a little bit of offense and then they just go in a shell because they got a whole season ahead of them. And
okay, but that was like the last 3 years of Michigan football. We're looking at 2024 Michigan football, and there's a Sun Belt team eyeing that offense and being like, I don't know, this could be a thing.
You have one guy on your team that can do anything in Jalen Rayner. He's a true sophomore who's barely over 200 pounds, and you're Butch Jones.
This is no longer a team that is just going to see counter against Bowling Green for an entire half.
And when your season ends at the bottom of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant sandwich, then you're going to feel bad about that.
You gotta spend money to make money.
All right.
Are there any skill position guys of note there, Alex?
Corey Rucker, wide receiver. He's a 5th-year player who's played in most of those seasons. He had 1 injury year, but he's been around a long time. He's solid. Otherwise, not much. I mean, they use wide receivers a lot. They don't throw to the tight ends all that much. Their running backs, Jaquez Cross and Wallace, are okay. But again, I just don't see a lot of rushing room. And even with the Corey Rucker, I mean, you can put Will Johnson on him and probably be fine. It's just not that exciting of an offense, and a big step down from Texas, obviously. So it's an opportunity to kind of cleanse the palate a little bit on defense.
All right, we are going to take a break, come back, and talk about the defense of the Arkansas State Red Wolves.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives diehard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better.
Passion for e-commerce. Sell stuff online. Security. Performance. Conversion. Beautiful user experiences. Belle experience utilisateur. Monthly marketing. PPC SEO. Make your user A customer. Conversion. Eau de Parfum for online retailers. Love your website. Let Human Element show you how. Available at human-element.com and fine department stores, not fine department stores.
Oh my God, it's Owen Rosen. You're back.
I am back.
Oh man, I'm so glad to have you back with us. So you got a new company, Royal Oath Insurance, OATH.
You got it, Royal Oath Insurance, right out of Clinton Township. Super excited to be back.
I'm so glad, man. We had so many people, word of mouth. They told me they went through you before. They say you're the Swiss Army knife of insurance.
Yeah, something like that. Jumped off for a bit. Was actually working for an actual insurance carrier, but I'm back in the game, and a lot of people have reached out to me in the meantime. But super excited to be back and helping the MGO blog community and the entire Michigan community. Absolutely.
And you do Michigan, but you can also help in other states too, correct?
We can. That was something in the past really I didn't have as much capability of, but definitely can do that. I know we've got Michigan Nation all over the country. So
all right, cool. All right, tell people where they can call you.
586-229-1026.
All right, or visit Royal Oath, OATH, right? RoyalOathInsurance.com.
Yep, call or text me anytime.
All right, thanks, Owen. I'm so glad to have you back.
Thanks, Seth. Glad to be back.
Hi, MGoBlog. It's Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. Warmer weather is finally on the way, and just like spring practice, it's time to prep your air conditioner for the upcoming season. Because when it's 90 degrees outside, the last thing you want is your system to fail you when you need it most, like an Ohio State defensive line. So call us today at 734-238-3698 or visit us online at sharonsheating.com to schedule an AC tune-up or a free estimate for replacement.
Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? She's up to all her own tricks.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.2. Now turn our attention to the Arkansas State Red Wolves
You got
defense. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
You got
the
MGoRadio's number, and you got the right team. That's
hey, it's early in the season, so the number is easy. Anyway, so this is a smattering of transfers like you usually see at the lower levels these days, guys from UMass, guys who aren't playing at higher levels. And it doesn't really seem that they have a guy who's going to test Michigan anyway, except for the one spot where you're like, oh no, I don't want someone to be able to test Michigan, and that is defensive end, where they have a guy who might be looking at Evan Lincoln being like, I can get this guy.
Potentially, Brian Whitehead II is a pretty decent player. I don't want to say he's anything incredible. He's young in his career, relatively speaking. He didn't play a ton at Liberty, and now he's transferred into Arkansas State. But the Tulsa tape was pretty grim. There wasn't a lot going on in this defense, but Whitehead really was the decisive player in that game because Arkansas State really didn't cover anyone for the most part in that game. Third down dropbacks, if there wasn't pressure, Tulsa was able to find receivers pretty easily. And then it started to get shut off because Whitehead was tearing around the edge and it was speeding the quarterback up. And that was how they were able to get off the field enough times in the second half of this game to win it. So Whitehead, if they line him up over Link, that could be an interesting matchup because otherwise I don't see a lot going on here. The defensive tackles are under 300 pounds. Their zones were very, very porous. Guys were open. They're playing corners 8-9 yards off and giving up free first downs if you wanted them. It was a little reminiscent of Michigan State's old secondary under Mel Tucker where no one is really being covered at all. It was not great. And this was not a good defense last year. They gave up over 400 yards to Central Arkansas in the first week, and then they were really getting gashed by Tulsa early before Whitehead started to put a stop to it in the second half of that game.
So, one thing that kind of leapt out is that there was cyan all over the secondary.
Yeah, safeties were a bit of an issue. They gave up a deep ball touchdown. The safeties were also culpable for some real tackling issues in this game. I would like to point out how bizarre this game was. Arkansas State gets a punt return touchdown that proves decisive in a 4-point final margin. They also get one of those where the running back fumbles the ball at the half-yard line as he's galloping into the end zone, and it rolls out the back of the end zone. And that was on a play in which they had blown 3 or 4 tackles in the secondary. I mean, that clip sums it up, the caliber of football in this game, where 40-yard run off of broken tackles then ends with the running back fumbling it out the end zone. This was rough.
Sure. So, you're looking at this and you're like, if Michigan can pass block reasonably well, this might be an opportunity to actually try to push the ball downfield. Michigan has not really had an explosive, I was going to say in the pass game. We're going to revise that. Hasn't had an explosive period. And, one of the most important things going forward is try to get this offense to do more than gain 5 yards at a chunk and then, punt or kick a very long field goal.
Yeah, this is a good game to get Davis Warren in some rhythm if they can give him the time, because I think guys will be open, and we know that receiver is a bit of a problem spot for Michigan, but this defense should be able to give them some real opportunities, and same thing on the ground. Like, even with the blocking issues you had up front, these DTs, they're not very big, so Michigan has a size advantage over them and should be able to get some push. I expect that Arkansas State will fire downhill and will want to just gum up the run game with their linebackers, which is what they did in the second half against Tulsa, especially. One of their linebackers is Kenny Willekes' brother, by the way, Charles Willekes.
Yes.
Started at Michigan State before transferring there. So I think they'll try and key in against the run, and if that's the case, then Warren should pass it more, and I think he could have some success, because this just isn't a very intimidating defense by any means.
I got to point out a couple things. First of all, the Tulsa offensive tackle that they were abusing it has a 28.3 career to PFF. So, I mean, we're talking about one of literally the worst tackles in FBS, which if Evan Link is that bad, not throwing that out there is like it's an impossibility, but, if
it's just that, we saw the last game. We saw the most recent game.
It's like there's cannot pass protect against Texas, and they cannot pass protect against literally anybody in FBS, because until this game, Whitehead was not anything. He's a 6'1", 250 guy. He didn't really do anything at Liberty last year. They played Bowling Green, and Bowling Green pretty much shut him down. And it's not like we're not talking about super test here. Second thing is those safeties, the style of bad they are is small and slow. So, this is a team that just really has nobody to stick with Loveland. And you saw that interception last week where Warren throws at Loveland, and Loveland is, you don't throw that unless the tight end is crossing the guy. So, we put that on Loveland a little bit, but I think that Loveland thought he could outrun the safety on that play.
No, he was just running the wrong route. That's what Sherwin Moore confirmed afterwards.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, he had the fumble. He was responsible for that interception, but he's still Michigan's best player, and Michigan needs to try to leverage him. And one of the things that will be interesting to me is to see if the offense shifts and how does it shift, because they got a crisis, and you never want to waste a crisis. So this is going to be the game where we see what they think they did wrong and how to fix that. And if it's not more Khalil Mullings and Max Bredesen, it's basketball season, kids. All right, we're going to take a break, come back for one sort of meta segment. There's more lawsuits on the horizon.
This is the University of Michigan.
Stay tuned for Gus, but first, it's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with peak confidence. Learn more at peakwm.com/mgoblog. Oftentimes, people will ask me exactly what do we do here at Peak Wealth. Well, you already know we make killer spreadsheets. You already know my voice kind of sucks for radio, but you might not know that we approach Roth conversion.
Enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Also, one more thing you might want to know what we don't do. We don't go on Netflix dressed up like morons and hide from the camera like Brohio. Gus, what's the down and distance?
3rd and 5. Stroud in trouble. Stroud is sacked again.
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back, like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to thosewhostayuofm.com. Again, that is thosewhostayuofm.com to support. Go Blue.
1 and 2 and...
If you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, you want a Michigan man in the huddle. Call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul at 248-924-9458 or visit his website at michiganlawgrad.com. John is a proud graduate of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business and Michigan Law School. He looks forward to showing you the Michigan difference.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing homes simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go Blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.2. Thank you to the Missing Chums for this week's music, and we have a bit of a poo-poo platter of a segment. First of all, we would like to note the passing of James Earl Jones. Obviously, a guy who was a big part of Michigan fandom over the Harbaugh era, where Harbaugh managed to convince him to do the "This is CNN" voice for the intro video. And every time I ever saw it, I was just like, oh man, what a flex by this university. Because I went to like a Georgia game, and like there was a commercial break, and they're like, look at all these famous people that went to our school. And it was like reality television contestants and Florida Georgia Line, bad country bands. And Michigan was like, yeah, James Earl Jones, the EGOT winner who did who was Darth Vader on a lark. Right. It's just like, what a dude, what a voice, and rest in peace, James Earl
Jones. I wish I had more to add, other except for his story is pretty. It's a pretty good story for a Michigan, graduate. Like, he started super poor, living in the South. His family had to move him up, and he lived with his grandparents in the state of Michigan. Gets to the University of Michigan, and they're expecting him to like become an engineer or something, or become a doctor. He's in med school at first, and he just discovers that he really likes acting. And by his senior year, the Daily is like gushing about James Jones. It's incredible how he was able to find something completely unrelated to what he did. And it wasn't just his voice. He had it. And you could see it in the daily articles about him in the 50s. And then as he goes on, it's like, well, this is what happens when you send a kid to Michigan and he finds what he wants to do there. So it's not just a flex. I think it's a real Michigan story.
But it's also a flex.
Yeah.
Other news is that Braylon Edwards and Denard Robinson have filed a suit against the Big Ten Network and the NCAA about NIL back pay, or I'm not exactly sure what the details are, but it's going to be another one of these suits. Interesting in two different ways. One of them is that, Denard Robinson, of all the people who have ever been through Michigan in the last 30 years, is the one who missed out on the most money based on NCAA rules. And Braylon Edwards probably isn't far behind. And those guys want a piece of the pie, and they are not content with being part of the class action in the Jeffrey Kessler lawsuit. So you are able to opt out, and I think that this is going to be part of a trend, because there are going to be certain players who are going to look at this settlement and be like, if you were the punter, or if you were like a running back who picked up 800 yards one year, yeah, okay, this makes sense for you, but it doesn't make sense for Denard Robinson. It doesn't make sense for Braylon Edwards. And I think that there are going to be other players at other schools who are highly prominent who are going to look at the fact that this money is being distributed and they're going to get some, measly cut when a lawsuit and the probably inevitable settlement to follow is going to be more profitable to them. And that's why I think Big Ten Network is involved here, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have not been sued yet.
Yeah.
And they don't want this smoke, because they know that basically all of these arguments are just never going to fly in court. So to me, this looks like a vanguard of a wave of smaller lawsuits with a couple of named plaintiffs that don't get rolled into a class from highly prominent college football players. And the NCAA, nothing short of congressional legislation is going to stop the never-ending parade of lawsuits.
Well, they kited this for so long. Since 1893, players have been getting paid, and the NCAA, the thing that existed before the NCAA, and before that it was even nothing. The schools were just making money off these guys and figuring out ways to make sure that they keep the money and doesn't go back to the players. From the moment that football became something that makes more money than it costs, and I don't know how far back they're going to be able to go, but everyone who was a star in college and didn't get to profit from that, it's all open now. And Denard is like the vanguard, like you said. He's just like the perfect example, right? That he couldn't even get paid for being on the NCAA cover, until he was not a player anymore. And so you're looking at like these guys who had a humongous amount of value to college. The schools, and Michigan under Dave Brandon certainly did everything they could to make money off of Dave Brandon, up to and including like making T-shirts until they had to pull them, right? And they did the whole the Legends jerseys thing was also like, let's get people to buy Devin Gardner jerseys, and it was they've been being so blatant about the money grab that it's very hard to see them getting out of any of this. And it's not just, the Big Ten Network was founded on the principle of we can make more money off of these guys. That's the whole idea. So I don't know how they get out of it. I'm not the law talking guy. It's one of several very interesting lawsuits right now going on that basically they used to only win because they could win, and there's no real legal basis. And if you apply a legal basis to any of these things, I'm thinking right now of like Florida State trying to get out of the ACC. Have you followed that one at all?
What I saw lately is that there was some sort of court event that didn't explicitly state that that Florida State was about to get ruthlessly smacked down, but implied it.
Right. Yeah, it's so one of the law talking guys on Twitter is David McKenzie. He's been following this case a lot, and they've been waiting for. It's hard for them to tell from an appellate court because it's not like a judge is making a ruling here, and there's not good news. You'd have to like hear what questions they ask and then kind of figure out where they're feeling, right, what they're thinking, and he's the one who's been kind of translating what they say. And the big deal here is that he thought that Florida State's big gun, like the final listen, their big way of getting out of this is we're a state, and the state of Florida was going to say we can nullify any contract we want to. I think sovereign immunity is the legal term for it. And basically the questions they had were all about how, if you apply sovereign immunity to this case, isn't that just going to destroy literally every single contract in college sports? And they didn't have an answer for it. And Mackenzie thought, like, okay, this is the moment. This is like this tells us that they're not going to, that sovereign immunity is not going to fly, and therefore FSU is not getting out of this.
Yeah, which is, I guess, good for I don't want more realignment right now. I don't people say Power 4, and it's just like, stop it. I don't like it. But there is realignment news on the horizon, is that the Pac-2 has successfully become the Pac-7, I think.
6. Isn't it 6 right now?
Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and like a couple more schools, I thought.
No, because they're talking to UNLV, but UNLV is not in yet. They can't separate UNLV from Nevada. So it's it's San Diego State, Boise State. Oh my God, why am I?
So they seem to be trying to make sort of a Mountain West plus.
Fresno, who we just played. Yeah, they're trying to. I mean, they're trying to get some California schools, and it's too late. Everyone immediately thought, like, oh man, go get Cal and Stanford back if you're going to get some California schools. They can't. Cal and Stanford are now under the same grant of rights that Florida State is. They're not getting.
Well, yeah, but what they're saying is that once the ACC disintegrates, which it probably will inevitably, they are probably going to be forced back into the Pac-X.
Yes, but yes and no. I mean, Stanford and Cal are pretty adamant that they don't want to be in a conference with Oregon State and Washington State. Like, that's just.
Well, they were in a conference with Oregon State and Washington State,
and they blame them for falling apart.
To be, I guess, yeah. I mean, but I don't know. It's just unfortunate, and the dissolution of the Pac-12 is really just like the "I'm going to be the Joker" moment for college football realignment. But it is what it is. So
yeah, yep.
This is the state of things in 2024.
I imagine the next big battle is going to be over whether small schools can get dumped, right?
Yeah,
like how you can get a Rutgers out of a Big Ten kind of thing,
or if they just start like leaning on them and take less money, etc. Because like any sort of. The idea of loyalty is a faint memory in college football. But that'll do it for us this week. Keep your head up, Trophy Go Burr. And we'll see you next week.
Boris is a mayor and a land surveyor with